They built a fence on my property, and then billed me $20,000. But instead of paying, I made them regret ever messing with me. You ever get that feeling when life finally seems to fall into place? Yeah, that was me the day I moved into what I thought was the perfect neighborhood. Wide streets lined with trees, kids riding bikes, neighbors waving while trimming their lawns. The kind of place you see in those real estate brochures with smiling families and golden retrievers running in slow motion. That was my dream. Peace, community, and maybe a weekend barbecue or two. After years of working overtime, saving every dollar, my wife and I finally bought our dream home. 3 bedrooms, a nice backyard, and a little garden space she was already planning to fill with flowers. I remember standing in the driveway the first day, looking around like, man, we made it. And the neighbors? Oh, they were perfect too, at least at first. Within an hour of moving in, the couple from across the street, Linda and her husband Mark, came over with a plate of cookies and that welcome to the neighborhood energy. They told me about how wonderful the community was and how everyone looked out for each other. Just wait till you meet the HOA board, Linda said with a smile that was way too polished. They really keep this place looking beautiful. At the time, I thought that was a good thing. I mean, who doesn't want a clean, safe neighborhood? Little did I know, those words were the first red flag waving right in my face. But back then, I brushed it off. I was too busy unpacking boxes and figuring out which light switches did what. The next morning, I woke up early, grabbed a cup of coffee, and stepped outside. The air smelled like cut grass and fresh paint. Yeah, it was that kind of neighborhood. A few houses down, someone was power washing their driveway at 7 a.m. sharp. Across the street, a lady was measuring her hedge with a ruler. I laughed. Man, these people take their lawns seriously, I said to myself. Later that week, we got our first HOA newsletter. It was 4 pages long, color printed, laminated, and full of friendly reminders. Stuff like: no trash cans visible after 6 p.m. All mailboxes must be uniform in color and height. Holiday decorations may only be displayed from December 1st to January 2nd. I remember joking to my wife, guess I better not sneeze too loud or the HOA will fine me for noise pollution. Still, I didn't mind it much. Rules are rules, right? If it keeps the neighborhood nice, I'm fine with it. Weeks passed, and life was good. I'd mow my lawn on weekends, wave at the neighbors, and even joined a few small get-togethers. Everyone seemed pleasant enough on the surface. You know that fake nice energy where people smile at you, but you can just feel the judgment behind their eyes? Yeah, that was the vibe. One afternoon, I was putting up a small wooden fence around my backyard, nothing fancy, just a little privacy. Mark from across the street came walking over, holding his lemonade. Hey buddy, make sure you submit that to the HOA before you finish, he said, grinning like he was giving me some friendly advice. I blinked. Submit it? For what? Oh, every exterior change has to be approved first. Fence, paint color, even what kind of plants you put in the front yard. I laughed because I thought he was joking. Spoiler alert, he wasn't. I sent in a fence request form, yeah, that's a real thing, and waited. Weeks passed, no response. When I called the HOA office, the lady on the other end sounded like I was interrupting her nap. It's under review, she said flatly. So, I waited some more. Meanwhile, everyone else's fences looked exactly like what I was planning to build. But apparently, mine was under review. That's when I started noticing the cracks in the perfect neighborhood dream. One evening, as I was pulling into my driveway, I noticed 2 HOA members standing near my mailbox, writing something down. They smiled when I waved, but it was one of those smiles that didn't reach their eyes. A few days later, I got a notice in the mail, grass exceeding height limit. Warning issued. I checked the yard. The grass was maybe half an inch taller than usual. I couldn't help but laugh. Are they measuring this with laser precision now? At first, I brushed it off. But then it happened again. Another notice. Then another. Every week, it felt like I was being watched. Every tiny thing became a reason for a letter in the mail. Trash can visible. Fence too tall. Mailbox slightly faded. That's when it hit me, this wasn't the peaceful neighborhood I thought I was moving into. It was a mini dictatorship run by a handful of power-hungry neighbors who took their HOA badges way too seriously. And I had no idea then, but their obsession with control was just getting started. Because soon, those same people smiling and waving across the street would try to take something much bigger than my time or my peace. They'd try to take my land. You ever wake up and just feel like something's off? Like the air outside is different? That was me, one random Tuesday morning. I poured my coffee, stepped out into the backyard like I always do, ready to start the day, and froze. There were construction workers in my yard. 3 of them. Digging holes, hammering posts, measuring lines. Like a mini construction site had popped up overnight. For a few seconds, I just stood there, trying to figure out if I was still dreaming. Then I yelled out, morning, guys. Can I ask what's going on here? One of them looked up, all casual, and said, we're putting up the new fence. I blinked. Fence? What fence? The HOA ordered it, he said, like that explained everything in the world. Now, to be clear, I didn't order a fence. My neighbor didn't mention a fence. And judging by the fact that half of those fence posts were on my side of the property line, something was very, very wrong. I walked closer, trying to stay calm. Okay, but this is my yard. Did anyone tell you you're on private property? The guy shrugged. We just follow the work order, man. HOA said to build along the line. Yeah, I said, pointing to my grass. Except that's not the line. He just nodded like it wasn't his problem and went back to hammering. At this point, my blood pressure was doing jumping jacks. I pulled out my phone and called the HOA office. After about 12 minutes of hold music that sounded like it was recorded inside a tin can, someone finally answered. Homeowners Association, this is Carol, how can I help you? Yeah, hi Carol. I've got construction workers building a fence on my property right now. They said you guys ordered it. Long pause. Then she said in that tone people use when they know they messed up but won't admit it, oh, yes. That's part of our new community improvement initiative. Community what now? She cleared her throat. It's for uniformity and drainage safety. The board voted on it last month. I frowned. Funny, I don't remember getting any notice about it. Oh, we sent an email, she said quickly. I check my email every day, Carol. There was no email. Well, she said, her voice tightening, it must have gone to your spam folder. I swear, if spam folder was a person, I'd have punched it right then. I told her, you can't just build on my property without permission. That's illegal. She gave this little fake laugh. Oh no, it's fine. The fence is for everyone's benefit. It'll increase your property value. Yeah, sure, because nothing says value like losing part of your land. After hanging up, I grabbed the property survey that came with my house. I knew where the line was, I had the little metal stakes still in the ground from when we moved in. The new fence was a good 2 feet inside my boundary. So I did what any calm, rational person would do. I walked right up to the construction crew and said, hey guys, you're gonna have to stop. They looked at me like I just told them gravity stopped working. We can't stop without HOA approval, the lead guy said. Yeah, well, I'm the homeowner, and I don't approve. He sighed and muttered, man, I just work here, before putting his headphones back in. At that point, I realized something, this wasn't a simple misunderstanding. This was the HOA pulling strings behind the scenes, and they didn't care what I thought. Later that day, I walked over to Linda and Mark's house, my friendly neighbors across the street. Maybe they'd heard something. Oh, that? Linda said, pretending to be surprised. Yeah, the board mentioned it at the last meeting. It's to help with drainage safety. Apparently, your lot's part of the runoff zone. Runoff zone? I asked. My backyard doesn't even flood. She smiled that same polished smile. Well, it's for everyone's benefit. There it was again, everyone's benefit. Translation: shut up and deal with it. By sunset, half the fence was already up. Tall, ugly wooden panels cutting right through my yard like some medieval border wall. My dog didn't even know where to pee anymore. That night, I sat on my porch, staring at it. My perfect neighborhood suddenly felt smaller, tighter, controlled. I thought about calling the cops, but technically it wasn't a criminal issue yet, just a civil matter. Which basically means, good luck figuring it out yourself. My wife tried to calm me down. Maybe it's temporary, she said. But deep down, I knew it wasn't. The HOA didn't do temporary. They did permanent, paperwork, and power trips. And this was their first move. They'd drawn a line, literally, right through my property. And trust me, I wasn't about to let them keep it there. A few days after the mysterious fence incident, things went quiet. Too quiet. The workers finished their job and disappeared, leaving behind that ugly wooden monstrosity cutting through my backyard. I tried to tell myself it was over, maybe the HOA realized their mistake, and I'd wake up to an apology letter or, at the very least, a refund for the headache. Instead, I got a bill. It showed up on a Friday afternoon because, of course, bad news loves to arrive right before the weekend. The envelope had that official HOA letterhead on top, you know, the kind that instantly ruins your mood before you even open it. I tore it open and read the first line. Notice of violation, property boundary non-compliance. Okay, not great, but still fixable, right? Then my eyes landed on the next part. As part of the neighborhood fence upgrade, the total cost of construction, $20,000, is due immediately. I had to read it twice. Then a third time. $20,000. I actually laughed at first because it sounded like a prank. I checked the envelope again, half expecting to find a hidden camera somewhere. But nope, it was real. They seriously billed me for a fence I didn't order, didn't approve, and didn't even want on my land. I walked inside, waving the paper like a crazy person. Honey, you won't believe this. She took one look at it and said, please tell me this is a typo. I wish it was. Apparently, we owe $20,000 for the upgrade they built on our property. She just stared at me, mouth open. Upgrade? It looks like a prison fence. Exactly. I called the HOA right away, and after being passed around between 3 different departments, which, by the way, were probably just 3 people sitting in the same room pretending to transfer calls, I finally got connected to the big boss, the HOA president. His name was Gerald, and I swear, if arrogance had a face, it'd look exactly like his. Mr. Thompson, he said in this slow, calm voice that immediately made my blood boil, I understand you're confused about the assessment. Confused? I said. You built a fence on my property and sent me a $20,000 bill. Yeah, I'm a little confused. He sighed, like I was a child throwing a tantrum over my allowance. The fence was a board-approved community enhancement project. Every homeowner within the shared boundary zone is responsible for a portion of the cost. Shared boundary zone? I repeated. That's my backyard, Gerald. There's nothing shared about it except maybe the squirrels. He chuckled, actually chuckled, and said, Mr. Thompson, please understand, the HOA exists to maintain harmony and uniformity. The fence increases everyone's property value. You should be thanking us. I gripped the phone tighter. You mean thanking you for trespassing and charging me $20,000? He ignored the sarcasm. Failure to remit payment within 30 days will result in additional penalties, liens, and possible legal action. At that moment, I realized something terrifying. The HOA wasn't just annoying. They had power. Real, legal power. The kind that can slap a lien on your house because you didn't bow down fast enough. Gerald, I said, trying to keep my voice steady, I'm not paying for something I didn't authorize. You're on the wrong side of the law here. He gave a smug little hum. Our legal team would disagree. But you're welcome to attend the next board meeting if you want to express your concerns. Express my concerns. Yeah, right. That's HOA language for, come get humiliated in front of your neighbors. I hung up before I said something I'd regret. That evening, I sat outside staring at that fence again. It was starting to feel less like wood and nails and more like a symbol, a giant middle finger from the HOA planted right in my backyard. I started thinking about all the little violations they'd sent me before, the grass warning, the mailbox complaint, even that nonsense about my trash can. It all felt connected now. Like they were setting me up for this moment. My wife came out, holding 2 cups of coffee. "What are you thinking?" she asked softly. I looked at the fence and said, "I'm thinking we picked the wrong neighborhood." She sighed. "What are you going to do?" I smiled, but it wasn't a happy smile. "I'm going to that meeting. And I'm going to make them explain this face to face. Because one thing about me, I don't scare easy. You can bill me, threaten me, and even build a fence on my land. But if you try to steal from me, we're gonna have a problem." And Gerald? He was about to find out exactly what kind of problem I could be. If you've ever walked into a room thinking you're about to solve a problem, only to walk out wondering if you're the crazy one, welcome to my first HOA board meeting. It was held in the community clubhouse, a fancy name for a room that smelled like air freshener and passive aggression. About 10 people sat around a big table, a few board members, a couple of nosy neighbors pretending to care, and right in the center, Gerald, the king of the cul-de-sac himself. He gave me that fake politician smile as I walked in. "Mr. Thompson, glad you could make it," he said, like I was late to my own trial. I took a seat and spread out my papers, the property deed, the survey map, and a few photos showing exactly where the fence crossed into my land. "All right," I said, trying to keep things calm. "We need to talk about this fence situation. It's clearly built inside my property line, and this letter says I owe $20,000 for it. That can't stand." Gerald leaned back in his chair, fingers steepled like a wannabe CEO. "Mr. Thompson," he began slowly, "we've reviewed the property boundaries, and the fence is entirely within HOA maintained land." I blinked. "What? No, it's not. I literally have the survey right here." I held it up. "You see this line? That's my boundary. Your fence is over it." He gave this tight little smile. "That survey is outdated." I almost laughed. "Outdated? It's from the title company. I bought the house last year." He shrugged, turning to one of the board members like I wasn't even there. "We've had updated mapping done since then. The HOA's record supersedes individual deeds for shared areas." I said, "Shared areas? You mean my backyard? When did that become shared?" The lady sitting next to him, I think her name was Nancy, chimed in with a smirk. "Technically, all lots fall under HOA jurisdiction. You don't own the property outright, you're part of the community." That's when it hit me, they weren't trying to fix this. They were trying to gaslight me. I looked around the room. A couple of people avoided eye contact, others just looked bored, like they'd seen this show before. "So let me get this straight," I said slowly. "You built a fence on my property without permission, and now you're saying my legal deed doesn't matter because your map says otherwise?" Gerald folded his hands. "Precisely. The board operates with the latest zoning records. Your survey must not reflect recent adjustments." I laughed in disbelief. "Recent adjustments? What did you do, move the earth when I wasn't looking?" That one got a few chuckles from the back, which made Gerald's smile tighten. "Mr. Thompson, I'd advise you to lower your tone," he said. "We're trying to resolve this amicably." "Amicably?" I snapped. "You sent me a $20,000 bill for something I didn't even authorize. That's not amicable, that's robbery with paperwork." Gerald's expression hardened. "If you continue to use that kind of language, we may have to end this discussion." Oh, that was rich. End the discussion. That's HOA code 4, we're right, you're wrong, now shut up. I took a deep breath. "All right. Show me your updated map. Let's see where you think my land ends." He handed me a printed sheet, like some cheap photocopy of a blueprint. And sure enough, according to their map, my fence, the one I had built plans for and never even finished, was now somehow sitting inside HOA property. Convenient, right? I looked back at my deed, then at the map, and said, "This doesn't even match the lot coordinates filed with the county." Gerald shrugged again. "You're welcome to hire a surveyor, but the HOA's findings stand. If payment is not made within 30 days, penalties will apply." "Penalties?" I said. "You mean fines?" He nodded. "And possibly legal action." "It's nothing personal, Mr. Thompson. Just procedure." "Nothing personal. They always say that right before they stab you with a smile. I tried one last time. You can't just change property lines because it's convenient for you. I've got documentation. I'll take this to the city if I have to." Gerald's eyes lit up, not with fear, but amusement. "You're welcome to do that. But I'd advise against it. Legal disputes can get expensive." There it was, the threat. Smooth, casual, and delivered like he was giving friendly advice. I realized then that this wasn't about the fence anymore. It was about power. The HOA didn't want the money. They wanted control, to remind me that in their world, the rules didn't apply equally. When the meeting finally ended, Gerald stood up, shook my hand, and said, "We look forward to your cooperation." I smiled back, but it wasn't friendly. Don't hold your breath. Walking out of that room, I felt this mix of anger and helplessness, like I'd just been gaslit by an entire committee. It's a weird kind of frustration when you know you're right, but every system around you is built to make you feel wrong. That night, I sat on the porch again, looking at that damn fence glowing under the porch light. It used to be just wood and nails. Now, it felt like a monument, a reminder that in this neighborhood, truth didn't matter. The HOA made the rules, rewrote the maps, and owned the narrative. But as I sat there, one thought kept circling in my mind. They might have won this round. But the game wasn't over. After that circus of a meeting, I couldn't stop thinking about what Gerald said, that my deed was outdated. Outdated? My house wasn't even 2 years old. It didn't make sense. So, the next morning, I decided to do something the HOA clearly hadn't: check the facts. I grabbed my coffee, my folder of documents, and drove straight to the county office. If anyone had the real property records, it'd be them. The clerk behind the counter was this older lady with glasses hanging from a chain. She looked like she'd been doing this job since before the HOA was invented. I explained the situation, the fence, the map, the $20,000 bill, and she gave me this sympathetic look like, another HOA victim. She pulled up my parcel number and clicked around for a bit. Then she said, "That's strange." I froze. "What's strange?" She turned the screen slightly toward me. "The HOA map you're describing isn't the current record. Looks like they're using an old version of the property survey, one that was corrected about 6 years ago." "Corrected how?" I asked. "Well," she said, scrolling, "there was a boundary dispute back then. The county redrew several property lines after an audit. The updated map shows your fence area is fully within your property." I stared at the screen, trying not to laugh. "So, let me get this straight, the HOA's accusing me of violating their boundary using an old map that isn't even valid anymore?" She nodded. "That's exactly what it looks like." I just sat there for a moment, feeling this weird mix of relief and rage. On one hand, I was right, completely, legally right. On the other hand, that meant the HOA was lying through their perfectly polished teeth. I asked her for official copies of everything: the updated survey, the boundary correction, even the notes from the county engineer. She printed them all out, stamped them, and handed them over like a stack of pure justice. "Good luck," she said with a little grin. "You're gonna need it." Oh, she had no idea. I drove home grinning like a maniac. Finally, I had proof. Real, undeniable, government-stamped proof. I spread all the documents across my kitchen table like I was in a crime movie. "They messed with the wrong homeowner," I muttered. That evening, I emailed the entire HOA board, attached the county documents, highlighted the corrections, and added one polite but spicy line at the end. Please note that your map is outdated and invalid. The fence was built on private property, and I will expect immediate removal or compensation. I sat back, waiting for the fireworks. And, oh boy, they didn't disappoint. The next day, I got a reply from Gerald himself. One line. No greeting, no apology. Just, the HOA stands by its records. Our position remains unchanged. I actually laughed out loud. They were caught red-handed and still doubling down like it was nothing. So, I called him. Straight up. Gerald, I said, I just came from the county office. Their survey proves the fence is on my land. Your map's from 6 years ago. He paused. Then, with that same calm, smug tone, said, Mr. Thompson, county records often lag behind local assessments. We'll review it internally, but for now, the decision stands. I blinked. Lag behind? Gerald, the county is literally the authority here. You're the one lagging behind. He sighed like I was a noisy teenager. Let's not get emotional, Mr. Thompson. The board acts in the community's best interest. Community's best interest, the HOA's favorite excuse for anything shady. I realized right there that this wasn't about truth anymore. The facts didn't matter. They were protecting their pride, their power, and probably their wallets. Because if they admitted they were wrong, they'd have to tear down the fence. And guess who'd have to pay for that? Yep, them. That night, I sat out back again, looking at that fence. But this time, it looked different. Not just like an invasion, but like a challenge. The HOA could ignore emails. They could gaslight me in meetings. But they couldn't erase county records. And now, I had something they didn't expect: proof and patience. I wasn't just going to fight back, I was going to dismantle their whole little empire, piece by piece. Because once you show me I'm right, I don't stop until everyone else knows it too. After I found out the truth about the property line, I thought I'd finally get some peace. I was wrong. That was just the beginning of my personal HOA horror movie, except there were no jump scares, just endless passive-aggressive letters in my mailbox. It started small. One morning, I opened my mailbox and found a bright yellow envelope with the HOA logo on it. It read, Violation Notice, Grass Exceeds Community Height Limits. Height limits. For grass. I actually laughed at first. I thought it was a joke. My lawn looked perfect. I even mowed it 2 days earlier. But apparently, according to the law of the neighborhood, my grass was a 1/4 inch taller than regulation. A 1/4 inch. I swear they must have sent someone with a ruler and a grudge. Then came the second letter. Mailbox not in compliance with HOA color standards. What does that even mean? It's a mailbox, not a Ferrari. It's black, it works, and it holds mail. But apparently, it was the wrong shade of black. Community matte was the official color. Mine, they claimed, was industrial gloss. I didn't even know mailbox paint had personality types. Next came one about my trash bin being visible from the street. Yeah, because it's trash day. Where else is it supposed to be, in the attic? I realized what was happening. They were trying to wear me down. Each letter felt like a mosquito bite, small, annoying, but non-stop. It wasn't about grass or mailboxes. It was revenge. Pure, well-organized HOA revenge. Pretty soon, the neighbors started giving me weird looks. People who used to wave suddenly stopped. One guy even crossed the street to avoid me. Then I overheard one of them whisper, "That's the guy who's fighting the HOA. Heard he's suing the neighborhood." Suing the neighborhood? Seriously? I wasn't suing anyone, I just didn't want a fence built on my land. But rumors spread fast here, faster than fertilizer. It got worse. One night, I was taking out the trash, and I saw the HOA president, Mr. Powertrip himself, walking by with 2 other board members. They slowed down in front of my driveway, pointed at my lawn, and started talking quietly. I couldn't hear what they said, but I swear one of them smirked. It felt like being watched all the time. Every move I made, trimming a hedge, parking slightly crooked, I get a new notice. At one point, I had 7 violations pending at once. 7. It looked like they were trying to build a case to kick me out or something. I called it Operation Annoy the Homeowner. I tried talking to a few neighbors about it, the ones who used to be friendly when we first moved in. Most of them avoided getting involved. A few quietly admitted, yeah, the HOA's been rough lately, but it's better not to make waves. That's when it hit me, this wasn't just about me. The HOA had bullied other people before, too. They just kept quiet to avoid the nightmare. At night, I'd lie awake thinking about how everything changed so fast. A few months ago, this place felt like paradise. Now it felt like a gated kingdom ruled by people who got drunk on power and garden rules. I started keeping a folder, every letter, every notice, every text or email from the HOA. My wife thought I was going overboard, but I told her, if they want to play games, I'll start keeping score. But even with all the stress, part of me was starting to enjoy the challenge. It was like they underestimated me, thought I'd break down or move out. But they didn't know I'm stubborn. When someone pushes me into a corner, I don't crumble. I dig in. Still, I'd be lying if I said it didn't get to me. One evening, I sat in my backyard, staring at that ugly fence that started it all, feeling angry and exhausted. My wife came out, sat beside me, and said, maybe we should just let it go. I wanted to, I really did. But I couldn't. Not when I knew they were lying. Not when I knew that land was mine. So, I looked at her and said, no. They started this. I'm going to finish it. And that's when I decided, if they wanted a war, I'd give them one. But not the kind they were expecting. Because while they were busy sending petty violation letters, I was quietly planning my comeback. The revenge chapter was about to begin. After weeks of collecting those ridiculous violation letters, I finally decided it was time to bring in some backup, the legal kind. I wasn't going to keep fighting the HOA with lawn clippers and sarcasm. I needed someone who spoke fluent legalese. So, one morning, I took my thick folder, packed with every letter, photo, and email, and drove to a property attorney downtown. The guy's office was small but sharp, the kind of place where even the coffee smelled confident. He shook my hand, introduced himself as Mark Benson, and asked, so, what's the situation? I dropped the folder on his desk with a satisfying thud. Mark, I said, how much trouble can an HOA get into for building a fence on land that isn't theirs, then billing me $20,000 for it? He raised an eyebrow, flipped open the first page, and started reading. The deeper he went, the wider his grin got. After 10 minutes, he leaned back and said, well, they really messed up, didn't they? That was music to my ears. He explained everything clearly, apparently. What the HOA did wasn't just shady, it was straight up illegal. They'd trespassed, altered property boundaries without consent, and tried to fine me for their mistake. That's basically the HOA version of stealing your car and then charging you for the gas. Mark said I had an airtight case. But then he added something that changed my whole mindset. We could sue right now, he said, and we'd win. But lawsuits take time, and they'll just play victim to the community. You want to make them fold? Build a case so strong that when you finally show your hand, they don't even try to fight it. That was it, the spark I needed. So we made a plan. Step 1, evidence. I was already collecting letters, but now I started documenting everything. Every meeting notice, every petty fine, every email dripping with HOA arrogance, I saved it all. I even started recording our HOA board meetings, perfectly legal in my state, by the way. Step 2, photos and timestamps. I took pictures of the fence line from every angle, the property markers, the measurements, even Google Maps screenshots showing where my land ended and theirs began. Step 3, witnesses. I quietly started talking to neighbors who'd had similar problems. Turns out, I wasn't the only one. The HOA had a long history of bullying homeowners, most people just gave up or paid whatever fine they were told to. One elderly neighbor, Mrs. Palmer, told me they fined her for having a decorative garden gnome that didn't meet community aesthetics. She laughed about it, but I could tell she still resented them. Another neighbor got cited because his kid's basketball hoop was visible from the street. Yeah, apparently fun is a violation too. The more stories I heard, the more determined I got. This wasn't just about my fence anymore. It was about exposing how this little group of self-proclaimed rulers was controlling everyone with fear and paperwork. Step 4: Bait them. Mark suggested I stop reacting to their letters, just stay quiet, comply with nothing, and let them dig their own hole. The more they harass you, he said, the stronger your case gets. So that's exactly what I did. When they sent another notice saying my lawn was too green, yes, apparently that's a problem now, I just smiled, took a photo, and added it to the folder. When they said my garbage can lid wasn't properly aligned, I wrote down the date, the name of the inspector, and moved on. By this point, my HOA folder had turned into a binder. Then the binder turned into a box. My wife called it the case of the fence people. I called it Phase 2. I started showing up to board meetings with a calm smile. They'd talk down to me, try to intimidate me, but I just nodded, recorded everything, and left. You could see it on their faces, they were confused. They were expecting me to snap or argue. Instead, I was polite, quiet, and strategic. And that scared them more than anything. Behind the scenes, Mark was helping me build a timeline, dates, documents, violations, and witness statements, everything lined up perfectly. He told me, when the time comes, this HOA will wish they never touched your fence. Walking out of his office that day, I felt lighter. For the first time in months, I wasn't angry or stressed, I was focused. Because now, I wasn't just defending myself. I was planning something bigger. Something that would make the whole neighborhood see exactly who the real troublemakers were. And trust me, that fence was just the beginning of their downfall. By this point, I had a folder, a lawyer, and a mission. The HOA wanted to play games? Fine. But now I had the rulebook and they didn't even realize it. So one morning, with my coffee in one hand and my folder in the other, I headed to the city's zoning department. It was time to make things official. The lady at the front desk was polite, the kind of person who's seen every type of complaint imaginable, from potholes to feuding neighbors over tree branches. When I told her the HOA built a fence partially on my land, she raised an eyebrow and said, "Oh, one of those." She handed me a property boundary complaint form, and I filled it out like a man signing up for revenge school. I attached the old and new maps, photos, timestamps, everything. When I slid it back across the counter, she gave me a knowing smile. "Don't worry," she said. "We take these seriously." Music to my ears. From that moment on, the city's zoning department was in the loop. I didn't tell the HOA a single thing. I wanted them to walk right into their own mess, blindfolded. And oh boy, they did. A week later, I got a letter from them. I could tell it was trouble just from the red stamp on the envelope. Inside was a new fine notice: outstanding HOA balance, $5,000 late payment fee. Apparently, they decided that not paying for their fence crime was now a punishable offense. According to them, I failed to comply with community improvement contributions. That's HOA speak for "we made something up and hope you'll pay it." I actually laughed out loud. $5,000 for being right. These people were running a circus, and I was done being the clown. So I didn't respond. I didn't argue. I didn't even send my lawyer to scare them. I just let them keep digging. Every time a new letter came, I dated it, scanned it, and tossed it in my growing HOA crimes folder. I was building a timeline so clear and airtight, even a soap opera writer couldn't have made it more dramatic. Meanwhile, my lawyer Mark was thrilled. "Keep letting them talk," he said over the phone. "The more paper they send, the more evidence we have. They're basically writing your victory speech for you." But I didn't stop there. I bought 2 security cameras, one pointed at the fence line, another at my driveway. I wanted eyes everywhere. At first, it felt a little paranoid, but within days, I was glad I did. Because guess who I caught sneaking onto my property? Yep, Mr. HOA president himself. It was early morning, around 7 a.m. He thought no one was watching. There he was, walking along the fence with a clipboard, pacing back and forth like a confused duck, pointing at my grass, and muttering to himself. At one point, he actually stepped a few feet into my yard, probably inspecting something imaginary. I don't know what he expected to find: buried treasure? Evidence of a rogue lawn gnome? I just sat inside with my coffee, watching it all live on my phone. I even took screenshots. The man was so obsessed with his fake authority that he was now trespassing again. And the best part? The camera had audio. I could hear him mumbling something about non-compliance and getting this guy to pay one way or another. That was pure gold. So, I saved the footage, backed it up to 3 different drives, and sent a copy straight to Mark. He called me later that night, laughing. "This is perfect," he said. "He's digging his own grave on camera. Just keep collecting." So I did. For the next 2 weeks, I stayed quiet. No emails, no calls, no reactions. The HOA probably thought I'd given up. Meanwhile, the city had already scheduled a zoning inspection, and the HOA didn't even know it was coming. It was the calm before the storm, and honestly, it felt good. Every day that passed, I got a little more confident. The same people who used to scare me with violation letters were now unknowingly walking straight into a legal trap. And all I had to do was sit back, stay patient, and let the facts do the talking. I remember standing by that fence one evening, camera light blinking faintly, and thinking, "You wanted to mess with my land? Okay. Let's see how you like losing yours." Because the trap was set. And when it finally snapped shut, I wanted to make sure everyone, from the HOA president to the last nosy neighbor, heard it loud and clear. The night of the next HOA meeting, I walked in with a calm smile, the kind you wear when you already know how the movie ends. The usual setup was there: the folding chairs, the coffee table with stale cookies, and the same smug faces at the front pretending they were running a government. The HOA president, Mr. Power Trip himself, gave me that fake polite smile. You know, the one, the "I still think I'm in control" smile. "Glad you could make it," he said. "Oh, trust me," I replied. "I wouldn't miss this one." I took a seat near the front. Behind me, a few neighbors whispered. The rumors had been swirling for weeks. Apparently, I was the troublemaker who wouldn't pay his dues. If only they knew what was about to happen. After a few boring agenda points about parking decals and shrub heights, the president finally brought up my case. "Next," he said, adjusting his papers, "we need to discuss property compliance regarding Lot 47, Mr. Insert my last name." He looked at me. "We've sent multiple notices, and you've refused to pay the community improvement fees." This kind of defiance. Actually, I interrupted, raising my hand casually, "Before you go any further, I brought someone who can clear this up." Everyone turned as the door opened. In walked Mr. Allen, a zoning officer from the city, clipboard in hand, wearing that neutral government expression that says, "I'm not here for drama, but I'm about to cause some." The president blinked. "And who exactly are you?" Mr. Allen flipped open his badge. "City Zoning Department. I'm here regarding the boundary complaint filed on this property." You could feel the air change instantly. Half the room went silent, the other half leaned forward like it was the season finale of a TV show. Mr. Allen started speaking in that official tone only government workers can pull off. "After reviewing the official land records, property surveys, and on-site measurements, we've confirmed that the fence in question was constructed beyond the HOA's designated boundary." Translation: the fence is on my land. The president blinked fast, trying to process. That's not possible. Our maps clearly show." Mr. Allen cut him off gently, flipping through his clipboard. "Those maps are outdated. The corrected boundary map, updated after a city survey 5 years ago, clearly places the fence about 3 feet into private property owned by Mr. My name." You could practically hear jaws dropping. A couple of neighbors gasped. One old lady whispered, "Oh my God, they really did build it on his land." The president's face turned red, the kind of red you only see on people caught lying mid-sentence. There must be some mistake, we were told. I smiled and reached into my bag. No mistake. Here's the copy of the same map from the county office. Date stamped and verified. Mr. Allen nodded. Matches our records exactly. Now the room was buzzing. The HOA secretary looked like she wanted to sink through the floor. One of the board members whispered something to another and then quietly stood up and left, no words, no goodbye. Just poof, gone. The president tried to regain control, waving his hand like a flustered magician. This doesn't change the fact that the homeowner refused to cooperate. I raised an eyebrow. Refused to cooperate with what? Paying 20 grand for your mistake? Mr. Allen looked up. Actually, according to city code, the HOA could face fines for unauthorized construction on private property. You may want to consult legal counsel before issuing any more notices. The silence after that line was pure gold. You could almost hear the sound of the HOA's collective ego deflating. The president stammered, we were only following standard procedures. I leaned back and said, yeah, maybe next time your standard procedure should include checking who owns the land first. Even a few neighbors chuckled. Within minutes, the board's confidence crumbled. One member resigned on the spot, muttering something about not wanting to be part of a lawsuit. Another started arguing quietly with the president, blaming him for not verifying the documents. It was chaos, glorious, well-deserved chaos. Meanwhile, I just sat there sipping my lukewarm coffee like I was watching a reality show. Mr. Allen finished his report, handed them copies of the official findings, and said, "You'll receive a formal notice from the city within the week." Then he turned to me, shook my hand, and left. And that was it, the moment everything flipped. The same people who had been threatening me with fines, letters, and lectures were now scrambling to save their own positions. When the meeting finally ended, a few neighbors came up to me quietly. "Hey," one said, "I didn't realize they were lying about all that." Another whispered, "Good for you." Someone needed to stand up to them. I just smiled. "Yeah," I said. "Guess that fence turned out to be more expensive than they thought." Walking home that night, I passed the fence, their precious community improvement. Under the streetlight, it looked smaller somehow, like a symbol of their crumbling authority. For the first time in months, I actually laughed out loud. The truth was out. The HOA's fake power was gone. And the best part? I hadn't even played my final card yet. After that explosive HOA meeting, I thought things might cool down. You know, they'd admit their mistake, take down the fence, maybe even apologize. But nope. The president doubled down in emails, trying to clarify the misunderstanding. Apparently, building on someone else's land and sending them fake fines was just a procedural oversight. Yeah, and a hurricane is just strong wind. That's when I decided, enough was enough. It was time to go full legal. Mark, my lawyer, was more excited than I'd ever seen him. He said, "We've got them on trespass, harassment, and defamation. This is the trifecta, my friend." I handed him everything, the letters, the photos, the camera footage, even the meeting recording where the zoning officer exposed them. He looked at the pile and said, "This is basically a lawsuit gift basket." Within a week, the lawsuit was filed, property damage, harassment, and defamation. The defamation part was my favorite. Remember those rumors they spread? That I was refusing to follow rules and disrupting the community? Yeah, all lies. I had neighbors willing to testify they heard it straight from the HOA board. Once the papers were served, it was like dropping a bomb in their little clubhouse. Suddenly, the same people who used to send me daily violation letters were very quiet. Then the real fun started. The HOA's insurance company stepped in, and trust me, those guys don't play around. After reviewing the case, they realized how bad it looked. A board approving illegal construction? Harassing a homeowner? Ignoring city zoning laws? It was a PR nightmare waiting to happen. So, they settled fast. Tens of thousands of dollars in damages. Plus legal fees. My lawyer called it a textbook example of overreach. I called it karma with paperwork. But the icing on the cake? The HOA president didn't get away clean. Turns out, part of what he did, forging approvals and misusing HOA funds for the fence, violated his fiduciary duty. That's fancy legal talk for you used your position to act like a dictator. The board voted to remove him. Then the city fined him personally for unauthorized construction on private property. Watching that smug grin disappear from his face was honestly the most satisfying thing I've ever seen. At the next meeting, the first one without him, the atmosphere was completely different. No arrogance, no fake smiles. Just silence. The new interim president cleared their throat and said, "We'll be reviewing all future projects with proper approval from now on." Yeah, I bet you will. Some of the neighbors who'd avoided me before actually came over afterward. Hey, one said, "I guess you were right all along." Another offered to help fix my side of the fence. A few even admitted they'd been scared to speak up about their own HOA horror stories. It felt good, not just because I won, but because everyone finally saw what was really going on. But even as the dust settled, I couldn't shake one thought: this wasn't over. Sure, I got compensation. Sure, the president got what he deserved. But the system itself, the way these HOAs hold power over people, that still needed a spotlight. So I decided to keep the story alive. I wanted others to know that you don't have to bow down to people hiding behind clipboards and fake rules. You can stand your ground, literally. That's when the idea hit me: why not share my story? Not just for me, but for everyone who's ever been bullied by an HOA, fined for a mailbox, or shamed for a flower pot that was too colorful. Because if there's one thing I learned through this whole mess, it's that when you stay quiet, they win. But when you fight smart, they crumble. Now, every time I walk past that fence, or what's left of it, I smile. It's still standing, but this time, it's mine. And the best part? The HOA had to pay to fix the portion they built wrong. So technically, they paid for my fence. Call it poetic justice. And maybe, just maybe, the beginning of a much bigger plan. Because while they thought the story ended here, for me, this was just Act 1. With the lawsuit settled and justice officially served, the narrator finally stands before the wooden fence that caused months of stress, anxiety, and chaos. Now, it's just a symbol of arrogance and the perfect opportunity for poetic revenge. Armed with a power drill and a quiet smile, the narrator begins dismantling the fence board by board, nail by nail. Every creak of the wood feels like a small victory, every plank a reminder of how far they've come. But instead of tossing the lumber away, they decide to make a statement. A few weeks later, the same boards stand proudly in the narrator's front yard, reassembled into a sturdy wooden bench. On its backrest is a metal plaque that reads, "Property of the HOA, thanks for the lumber." When neighbors walk by, they can't help but laugh. The irony spreads through the community like wildfire. The same HOA that bullied and fined homeowners is now the butt of the neighborhood's favorite joke. Even former board members, now embarrassed by their role, start quietly resigning. For the first time in a long while, the neighborhood feels united, not under the HOA's control, but against its corruption. The narrator sits on the bench one evening, coffee in hand, watching kids play nearby and neighbors wave. The once hostile community has turned supportive, seeing them not as a troublemaker but as the person who finally stood up to the abuse. A moment of peace and satisfaction. Justice wasn't just served, it was handcrafted. The dust has finally settled. The fence is gone, the lawsuit is over, and for the first time in months, the air feels light again. The narrator stands on their porch, looking over their reclaimed land, the same patch of earth that nearly cost them everything. It's quiet now. Peaceful. But beneath that calm lies a deeper truth, a lesson carved from every sleepless night, every meeting, every letter.